Hello, I'd like to talk to you for about 5 minutes about performance measures, best practices, and dashboards. The reason I want to talk about this is because I understand there's some confusion and maybe even misunderstanding about this with judges and trial courts. The Performance Measures Committee recently issued their report. We sent that to you, and if you can't find it, it's located on the SCAO website. What the Performance Measures Committee did, and this was a committee headed by Judge Sullivan from Kent County. It had several judges and court administrators as members, is they looked at the work done by the National Center of State Courts. Performance measures for courts is not something new. It's been around about a decade. The National Center has some recommended performance measures. This group studied those, piloted them in several courts, and made recommendations for how those could be used in our courts. There's also some legislation about best practices and dashboards. This would essentially require courts to use best practices and have a dashboard if they wanted to continue to receive the full amount that they currently receive from the Court Equity Fund and the Drug and Drunk Driving Fund. I think this is what's made some courts nervous. I've even heard judges say that this is going to result in assembly line justice if this is what we have to do. Well, I really think that's wrong, and that's why I'd like to explain a little bit about this to you. Performance measures have been used in the private sector for many years, and they've been successful in making a difference with those companies. Now, take an example, Ford Motor Company. If you heard Ford Motor Company was going to be using performance measures, would you think this simply means they're going to speed up the assembly line and we're going to have reduction in quality, more problems with cars, less satisfaction with the customers? I don't think you'd think that at all. I think you'd presume that this was an effort to improve quality, to give us better cars, to give us greater customer satisfaction. That's what we're trying to do. This is designed to improve the courts. It's not designed to make judges work harder. If it's going to be changing what judges do, it's probably designed to make them work smarter. It's not designed to make judges look bad. It's designed to help courts improve. Let me give you a couple of examples of some of the performance measures that the National Center recommends that courts use. Because this is not all about speed. It's not all about collections. There's lots of different aspects of your performance that are very important. Court files. Who among us hasn't picked up a court file and it's missing documents, or there's documents in it that shouldn't be in it, or what's in it isn't in the correct chronological order? Is it a best practice to have accurate, complete, and chronological court files? Well, it certainly is. Does it save the people that use those court files, including judges, time when they're accurate, complete, and chronological? Of course it does. You can measure where you're at. You can have a plan to improve where you're, how you're doing. That is a best practice and can be put on a dashboard. Jurors. Many courts regularly use jurors. Some courts use too many. That is, you can measure the percentage of jurors that sit in the jury box, sort of your percentage of jurors utilized. Is a court that's using 40% of the jurors they bring in a more efficient court than a court that's using 30%? Of course it is. Is it a best practice? Well, yeah, what's it do? It saves money for the jurors. It is less a burden on the citizens who serve as jurors. It even assists in the courthouse. It's easier to check in a smaller jury than a jury that's too large. It reduces congestion, makes it easier to work with that jury. It's a best practice. You can measure it. You can report it on a dashboard. It also has to do with something a little bit more intangible and harder to measure things. The experience that litigants and attorneys have in a court. Did you have a chance to be heard? How were you treated by court staff? These are, questions that go to attitudes and opinions of people, but this is done all over. My daughter went to a hospital emergency room recently. We received a survey asking a variety of these questions. I've had them from retail stores. I even had one recently from a place that changed the oil in my car. You think about that. It's a $25 oil change, but it's important enough for them to mail a survey to me, with a stamp, get it back, tabulate it. That's important for their operation to know about the experience that I have. Well, maybe this should be important for courts to know how we're doing also. So why does it, you might say, even this is important, why does it have to be public? Why does this have to be on a dashboard? Well, that's a good question. But, we are in the public sector. What we do is public. Courts are public. When we're reversed by the Court of Appeals, it's not done privately, it's done publicly. When we're affirmed by the Court of Appeals, it's done publicly too. That's the way courts operate. That's the way best practices are in government. Schools are doing this. They have public dashboards. Cities and townships are doing this. They have public dashboard. One reason it's important to make it public is because that underscores the importance of this. And this is important. This is going to help all courts improve. Now, I know people are concerned. They're thinking this is going to affect what's going to happen in an election. I'm going to draw an opponent because of this. I suppose that's possible, but I think that's unlikely. I think this is more likely to be seen as something positive. This shows a judge that is concerned about the performance of their court. This shows a judge who is, valuing the time of their citizens. They're trying to reduce the number of jurors that they bring in, not just to save money, but to have less burden on people. I think this is more likely to have a positive effect on judges and courts in the minds of the public than any possible negative effect. This is going to be good for courts. It's going to help us all improve performance. Now, what can you do? Well, first, if you haven't read the report already, read the report. What else can you do? Think about performance measures. What should you be measuring? Don't just go to speed and collections. Think about what is important that you do, what you can measure, and what you can improve on. It's going to be different for different courts. Depends on the docket you have. If you don't use juries, there's no point in you measuring your jury utilization rate. So you're going to have to think about which best practices are best for you. We are not going to tell you, you must measure this. We're not going to give you specific best practices. We think you should have a say in what you believe is important for your performance and what you want to measure. I'd also welcome your feedback. If you have thoughts or ideas on this whole concept, if you have thoughts and ideas about specific performance practices and what you can measure and why they're important to measure, I would welcome them. So please give me your comments. I also want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this message.